You have no idea who I am, do you? The old woman said it quietly. No trembling, no tears while a knife hovered 6 inches from her chest. Clara Martinez had nothing. No weapon, no plan, no backup. Just keys pressed between her fingers and a lie forming on her tongue. She stepped forward anyway. She put her body between a stranger and a blade because she could not make herself turn away. That one decision made in 3 seconds in a dark alley on a Wednesday night would detonate every ordinary thing about her life. Subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. Give it up, old lady. Last chance. Clara heard those words before she saw anything. She had been cutting through Alderman Alley the way she always did on late nights, 4 blocks shorter, 10 minutes faster, and her feet were already screaming after a 10-hour double at Rosie's Diner. She had $11.43 in her jacket pocket. She had been calculating for the last 3 blocks whether that was enough to cover Thursday and Friday before her paycheck hit. She wasn't thinking about any of that anymore. She pressed herself flat against the alley wall and looked around the corner. 2 men, both bigger than her. One holding a folding knife, nothing movie dramatic about it, just a short blade catching the flicker of the broken lamp above them. And that was enough. Between them stood a small old woman in a dark wool coat, white hair, perfect posture. Her purse was pulled tight against her chest with both hands. And she was not afraid. That was the thing that stopped Clara cold, not the knife, not the men, but the old woman's face. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't crying. She was looking at those 2 men the way a person looks at a minor inconvenience, like a closed road, like a long line at the grocery store. Her chin was up and her mouth was a flat, composed line, and she looked impossibly like the most powerful person in that alley. I said, last chance, the one with the knife repeated, stepping forward. The old woman still said nothing. Clara's heart was slamming against her ribs. Every rational thought she had was screaming the same word, leave. She was 26 years old, 128 pounds, and she had exactly 0 fighting experience. She had never even finished that self-defense class she'd signed up for 2 winters ago. She lasted 3 sessions before the schedule conflicted with her shifts. Her feet moved forward anyway. She stepped around the corner and heard her own voice come out loud and sharp, cutting through the cold air like a slap. Hey, I already called the cops. They're 1 block out, and I've got both your faces on camera, so you better decide real fast whether this is worth it. Both men spun. Clara kept walking toward them. Her legs were shaking under her jeans. She held up her phone screen, black battery dead, completely useless, like it was evidence, like it was a weapon. You called the cops, the one without the knife said. He wasn't asking. He was deciding. 2 minutes ago, Clara said. Maybe less. 4 seconds of silence, the kind of silence that has weight. Then the one with the knife looked at his partner and something passed between them, some quick wordless calculation, and the partner grabbed his sleeve. Forget it. Come on. Seriously? Move. They went, fast then running footsteps, slapping wet pavement until the alley swallowed the sound and there was nothing left but wind and the hum of a distant car on the main street and Clara's own breathing, which was coming out in short, ragged pulls that she absolutely could not control. She stood there. She waited for her legs to remember how to work properly. Then she turned to the old woman. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? The old woman was looking at her, not with relief, not with the weird, tearful gratitude Clara had half expected. She was looking at her the same way she had looked at the men, that same careful measuring stillness. Like she was reading something in Clara's face that Clara herself didn't know was there. I'm fine, she said. Low voice, a faint accent Clara couldn't immediately place. You're bleeding. Clara looked down. The keys had cut into her palm, a thin red line across the meat of her hand. She hadn't felt it happen. It's nothing, Clara said. That's really nothing. You should call someone. You shouldn't be alone out here. Do you want me to? What is your name? The question was quiet, but it had the quality of a door closing. Clara stopped mid-sentence. Clara, she said. Clara Martinez. The old woman nodded, one slow, deliberate nod, like she was recording it. I am Rosa, she said. And then with a precision that made every hair on Clara's arms stand up, I won't forget this, Clara. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't a threat. It was something in between, something Clara didn't have a word for, and it sat in her chest like a stone, as Rosa reached into her coat and produced a phone, sleek, expensive, the kind that cost more than Clara's monthly rent, and made a call that lasted fewer than 30 seconds. A few words in Italian. Calm. Almost bored. She hung up. "Someone is coming for me," she said. "You should go home. I can wait with you until—" "Go home, Clara." Rosa's voice was not raised. It didn't need to be. "You've done more than enough." Clara walked home. She didn't take the alley. She didn't count her steps. She pressed her cut hand against her jacket and moved through the empty streets and tried to figure out why. She still felt like something had just gone terribly, irreversibly wrong, even though by every logical measure she had just done a good thing and walked away from it clean. She was asleep by midnight. She dreamed nothing she could remember. She woke to her alarm, made coffee in the silence of her kitchen, and told herself it was over. She even believed it for about 6 hours. The black SUV appeared on her second shift, parked directly across from the diner's front window. She noticed it on her first break, noticed it the way you notice something that is working very hard to look like it belongs somewhere. Engine off, windows tinted just enough. She watched it for a full 30 seconds before one of the other waitresses bumped her shoulder and said, "You okay?" And she said, "Yeah, sorry," and went back to her tables. On her second break, the SUV was still there. She went home. It did not follow her. She checked twice, glancing back at the corners. But as she turned onto Pembroke Street, she caught from the end of the block a shape in a doorway, a man standing still watching her building. By the time she looked again, he was gone. "You're being paranoid," she told herself. "You had a bad night. You're seeing things." She almost managed to believe it. Then she found the envelope. It was on the floor of the hallway outside her door, slipped under the gap. Cream-colored, expensive feeling, even before she opened it, and her name written on the front in dark ink. Just Clara. No last name, no apartment number. As if whoever had written it already knew exactly which door in this building was hers. Her hands weren't steady as she opened it. A card, heavy stock, embossed on the front 2 letters, E or R. Inside 3 lines of careful handwriting. "You showed courage. You will be protected. Don't be afraid." Clara sat down on the hallway floor because that was where her legs gave out. She read it 3 times. She turned it over. She held it up to the light, and as if something hidden might appear. Nothing appeared. She sat there for a long time in the quiet hallway, her back against her apartment door, and the card in her shaking hands, and she thought about going to the police. She built the whole conversation in her head, the officer's face, the skeptical tilt of their head, the way they would ask her, and was there an actual threat made, and she would say no. A woman said she wouldn't forget her, and 3 days later she got a card saying she'd be protected. Was there a law against that? She went inside, she put the card in her kitchen drawer. She lay on her bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling and thought about Rosa's eyes, that stillness, that composure, the way the knife had not frightened her at all. Who stands like that? She pulled out her phone at 11:30 at night and typed 2 words into the search bar. Rosa Russo. The results loaded. Clara read the first paragraph. Then she put her phone face down on the mattress and pressed both hands flat against her thighs and sat absolutely still. She picked the phone back up. She read it again, slower this time, because she needed to be certain she had understood it correctly. Rosa Russo, 71, widow of Carlo Russo. The Russo family organized crime East Coast federal investigations dating back 30 years. Current head Damian Russo, her son, known to investigators as one of the most dangerous men in the city. Suspected in the disappearances of at least 4 individuals in the last 6 years. No convictions, 4 people disappeared. Clara set the phone down on the nightstand. She looked at the drawer where she had put the card. "You will be protected." She thought, what does protected mean from people like this? What does it cost? She didn't sleep until 4 in the morning. She went to work because she had no choice. She needed the money and she needed the normalcy, and she needed something to do with her hands besides shake. She moved through her shift on a kind of numb autopilot, filling coffee, smiling at the regulars, keeping her face doing all the right things while her mind turned the same terrible circle over and over again. The Russo family, the card, the man in the doorway. 4 people gone, At 12:15 on her lunch break, she called her sister in Phoenix. Sarah picked up on the second ring. Hey, I was literally just thinking about you. How's Sarah, Clara said. If someone told you that you were protected but you didn't ask to be, and the person saying it was someone dangerous, what would you do? Silence. Clara, what happened? Nothing, hypothetically. Clara, forget it, never mind. How are the kids? She spent 4 minutes listening to her sister talk about the kids answering in monosyllables. And when she hung up, she sat in the break room and thought, I can't tell her. If I tell her, she'll worry. And if she worries, she'll want me to do something, and I don't know yet what there is to do. She went back to her tables. Marco stopped her in the lobby that evening. Hey, Clara, guy came by asking for you today. Every muscle in her body went rigid. What? While you were at work, tall, good suit, 50 maybe, very polite. Marco paused, paintbrush in hand. The kind of polite that makes you nervous. You know I didn't tell him anything. I don't give out resident info, but I figured you should know. Did he leave a name? No, just said he'd try again later. Clara smiled in a way she did not feel. Thanks, Marco. She climbed 4 flights of stairs on legs that felt like water, turned down the hallway toward her door, and stopped. There was a man sitting in Mrs. Hendrick's chair outside her apartment. Medium height, dark hair salted with gray, a dark coat. He was looking at his phone and he looked up when he heard her. And he stood and he put his phone away with a movement so controlled and deliberate that it told Clara everything she needed to know about who she was dealing with before he said a single word. Clara Martinez, he said, not a question. Who are you? Her voice was steady. She did not know how. My name is Vincent. I work for the Russo family. Miss Russo asked me to come. Miss Rosa Russo. Yes. The hallway felt very small. Clara's hand was on the stairwell railing. She did not let go of it. What does she want? She asked. To thank you, Vincent said. She's inviting you to dinner. She would like to do this properly. And if I say no, something moved behind his eyes, not threat, not exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that lived in the same neighborhood. Then you say no, he said calmly. Mrs. Russo is not a woman who forces invitations. The careful way he said it made her skin go cold. She thought about the 4 people who had disappeared. She thought about you will be protected and what the other side of that coin might look like. She thought about Rosa in that alley, the knife, the stillnesses, those dark, evaluating eyes. Tell her thank you, Clara said, but I don't need anything. Vincent reached into his jacket and held out a card, cream-colored, heavy stock. She took it because refusing felt more dangerous than accepting. In case you change your mind, he said. He walked to the stairwell. He went down. She listened to his footsteps, unhurried, quiet, controlled, until she heard the lobby door close below. Then she was alone in the hallway, holding the card, her back against the wall, her heart going like a fist against a door. She went inside. She locked the deadbolt and then the chain. She put the second card on the kitchen table next to the first and stood there, looking at both of them under the yellow kitchen light, and what she felt was not the clean, manageable fear of the alley that had been sharp and fast and survivable. This was something different. This was the fear of standing at the edge of something vast and dark and not being able to see the bottom. She ate. She showered. She turned off the lights. And lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, she thought about the moment in the alley when her feet had moved forward without her permission, when her voice had come out loud and sharp and certain even though nothing inside her was certain at all. She had done it because she couldn't do otherwise, because turning away from that old woman with a knife at her chest would have left something broken in Clara that she would have spent the rest of her life not being able to name. She understood that about herself. She had always understood it. What she hadn't understood, what she was only beginning to understand now in the dark with 2 cream-colored cards sitting on her kitchen table, was that the same instinct that had made her brave could also make her completely, catastrophically vulnerable. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, she would figure out what to do. But even as she thought it, she knew with the deep, quiet certainty that lives below logic, that she had already run out of tomorrows where she could pretend this wasn't happening. The Russo family knew her name. They knew her building. They knew her door. And Rosa Russo had said with absolute composure, standing under a flickering lamp, with a knife 6 inches from her chest. I won't forget this, Clara. She had meant every word. She had told herself she would figure it out in the morning. But morning came and went, and the only thing she figured out was that she had no idea what she was dealing with, and that not knowing was somehow worse than knowing. She went to work. She did what she always did. She moved through the breakfast rush on muscle memory, taking orders and refilling coffee, and keeping her face perfectly arranged while underneath it she was running the same calculation over and over, looking for an exit she couldn't find. The diner was loud the way it always was on weekday mornings, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the grill, a table of construction workers arguing about the game last night, and Clara let the noise wash over her and tried to feel normal inside it. She almost managed it. Then she looked out the front window and saw Vincent. He wasn't in a car this time. He was standing on the sidewalk across the street with a coffee cup in one hand, talking to someone on his phone, looking like any ordinary man on any ordinary morning. But when Clara appeared in the window, his eyes found hers immediately. Not searching, not scanning. They went straight to her like he had known exactly where to look. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He just held her gaze for 3 seconds and then looked away. Clara went to the back, stood over the sink, and pressed her hands flat against the edge of the counter until they stopped shaking. Her coworker, Diane, followed her in. Diane was 53, had worked at Rosie's for 11 years, and had the particular superpower of all long-serving diner waitresses. She noticed everything. "Honey," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "you look like somebody walked over your grave." "I'm fine," Clara said. "You've said that 6 times this morning, and you haven't made eye contact with a single customer." "I have a headache." Diane looked at her for a moment with that flat, experienced look that said she did not believe a single word but was choosing not to push it. "Okay," she said. "Table 4 is asking for more toast." Clara went back out. Vincent was gone. The sidewalk was empty. She took the toast to table 4 and smiled and refilled coffee and thought, he wanted me to see him. That wasn't surveillance. That was a message. He was there so that I would know he was there. The thought was so clear and so cold that it cut right through the noise of the morning. She called in sick for her evening shift. First time in 14 months. She went home changed out of her uniform and sat at her kitchen table with both cream-colored cards in front of her and her phone beside them. She spent 40 minutes reading everything she could find about the Russo family. Not the surface stuff she'd found the first night. She went deeper this time, clicking through old newspaper archives, court records that were publicly available, a long investigative piece from a magazine 3 years ago that someone had posted in full on a forum. What she learned arranged itself in her chest like cold stones. Carlo Russo had built the family's empire over 40 years: construction, real estate, half a dozen legitimate businesses that sat on top of arrangements that were very much not legitimate. When he died 8 years ago, Damien had taken over. And where Carlo had been, by most accounts, a man who preferred negotiation, Damien was something else. Not reckless, never reckless. The articles were careful to say that because reckless men got caught, and Damien had never been caught, but absolute. When something needed to be handled, it was handled. When someone became a problem, they stopped being a problem. The mechanism of how that happened was never proven, but the pattern was there in the public record if you knew how to read it. And Rosa. Rosa had been at Carlo's side for 43 years. She attended church every Sunday at St. Anthony's, donated to 3 different children's charities, and had never once been named in any investigation. She was by every public measure simply an old woman who had loved her husband and loved her son and minded her own affairs. Clara thought about those dark, calm eyes, that lifted chin, the way she had looked at the knife. She thought Rosa Russo has never in 71 years been someone you could frighten. And the men in that alley had figured that out about 30 seconds too late. She closed her phone. She sat in the quiet of her kitchen. And then, because she could feel herself about to spiral into a fear so large it would swallow her whole, she did the one thing that always worked when she was about to lose it. She made a list. Practical, specific. What do I actually know? What do I actually need to do? What she knew, Rosa Russo felt she owed Clara something. The family was watching her, not threateningly, not yet, but consistently, deliberately. They wanted her to come to dinner. They had said no harm, but the message Vincent sent this morning, standing on that sidewalk with his eyes finding her through the glass, said something more complicated than no harm. It said, We know where you are. We know where you go. We are paying attention. What she needed to do, Clara stared at the list. The pen hovered. She couldn't write anything because there was no clean move. She could ignore them, but they were already ignoring her ignoring them. She could go to the police, but with what? A polite note and a man who'd stood on a public sidewalk. She could leave her apartment, leave the city, go to Sarah's in Phoenix, but she had no money, she had no car. And the voice in her head that was trying to be logical said with terrible clarity, if the Russo family wanted to find you in Phoenix, they would find you in Phoenix. She was still sitting at the table at 7 in the evening when her phone rang. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 rings, then she picked up. Clara, a woman's voice. Low accented, completely composed. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Clara's hand tightened on the phone until she felt the edge of the case pressing into her fingers. Mrs. Russo. Rosa, please. A brief pause. I understand Vincent came by last night, and I suspect you saw him this morning as well. I did, Clara said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Something about the directness of the acknowledgement, the fact that Rosa wasn't pretending it hadn't happened, made it easier to match that directness. He's hard to miss. He is, Rosa said, and there was something in her voice that might have been amusement. That is usually his purpose. I owe you an apology for that. It was not meant to be frightening. What was it meant to be? A beat. A reminder that you are not forgotten. Clara closed her eyes briefly. Mrs. Russo, Rosa, I appreciate what you're saying, I do. But I helped you in an alley because it was the right thing to do. I don't need anything from you. I don't want anything from you. I just want to go back to my life. I understand, Rosa said, and then after a pause that had weight to it, but I think you already know that what we want and what is no longer possible are sometimes very different things. The kitchen was very quiet. What does that mean? Clara asked. It means, Rosa said carefully, that the men you frightened away from me that night, they were not random. They were sent by someone who wants very much to cause my family pain. And they saw your face, Clara. They know you helped me. And the people who sent them are not the kind of people who forget that either. The cold that moved through Clara then was nothing like the cold of Alderman Alley. That had been weather. This was something that started in her spine and spread outward until she could feel it behind her eyes. You're saying I'm in danger, she said, because of that night. I'm saying, Rosa replied, that my family can protect you, and that without us, you are alone against something you don't fully understand. Another pause. I'm not asking you to be afraid of me, Clara. I'm asking you to be smart. The line hummed with silence. I need to think, Clara said finally. Of course, Rosa said. Take tonight, but please don't take longer than tonight. The call ended. Clara sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. Then she picked up her pen and crossed out everything on her list and wrote one word in the middle of the paper. Trapped. She stared at it. Then she crossed that out too because she couldn't afford to think that way. Trapped people panicked. Panicked people made the worst possible decisions. She needed to think, which meant she needed someone to think with, which meant she needed someone who could handle this information without falling apart. She called Tommy. Tommy Reyes had been her closest friend since they were 14 years old, sitting next to each other in a high school chemistry class, and both failing the same test in the same spectacular fashion. He was 30 now, worked as a line cook 3 neighborhoods over, and had the quality that Clara valued most in a crisis he did not catastrophize. He listened, he processed, and then he said something practical. He picked up on the first ring. Hey, what's up? Are you at work? Just got off. Why you sound weird? I need to tell you something, she said, and I need you to not freak out. There was a pause on his end. Clara, those exact words have never once preceded good news. I know. She told him everything. The alley Rosa, the cards Vincent, the SUV, the call. She told it straight through without stopping, the way she'd been trained by years of waitressing to give the whole order at once rather than piece by piece, and Tommy listened without interrupting, which was itself a kind of testament to how serious he understood it to be. When she finished, the silence on his end lasted about 5 seconds. Okay, he said. Okay, don't go anywhere. I'm coming over. He arrived 20 minutes later with 2 coffees from the place on the corner and that particular expression he wore when he was working hard to appear calmer than he felt. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and looked at the 2 cards and the paper where she'd crossed everything out. All right, he said. First question. Did she actually threaten you, Rosa, on the call? No, Clara said. That's what makes it so she was almost kind about it. But the thing she said about me being in danger from the people who sent those men, Tommy, if that's true, it might not be. It might be. He picked up one of the cards, turned it over, set it down. She could be manufacturing the threat, saying you're in danger so that you feel like you need them. I know, I thought about that. But, Clara said, she knew I was watching Vincent this morning. She called me tonight and apologized for it. She didn't have to do that. She didn't have to call me at all. She could have just sent Vincent again. Something about the way she talked to me felt. She stopped. Felt what? Real, Clara said quietly. It felt like someone telling me the truth even when the truth isn't convenient. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Or it felt that way because she's been doing this for 50 years and she's very, very good at it. That landed. Clara felt it land. Yeah, she said. I know. They drank their coffee. Outside the window, the city hummed along indifferently, the way cities do, full of people whose biggest problem tonight was traffic or a bad day at work, none of them sitting in a fourth-floor kitchen with the Russo family's calling cards on the table. What do you want to do? Tommy asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. You always know. You just don't want to say it yet. Clara looked at him. He was right. She did know. She had known since the moment Rosa said, don't take longer than tonight, because the way Rosa had said it hadn't been a suggestion. It had been the shape of a door with a closing time. I think I have to go to dinner, she said. Tommy's jaw tightened. Clara, I know. Going to dinner with the Russo family is not nothing. That's not something you come back from clean. Once you sit at that table, I know Tommy. You become part of something. You become someone they know, someone they've fed. That means something to people like that. I know, she said a third time, and this time her voice had an edge in it that made him stop. I know all of that, but Rosa said someone knows my face. Someone who sent men to hurt her. And if that's true, and I can't verify that it's not true, then I am already part of something. That happened the second I stepped into that alley. She paused. I didn't choose any of this, but I'm in it, and I'd rather be in it with some kind of standing than just be a loose end. Tommy looked at her for a long moment. Then he let out a slow breath and dropped his head back and stared at the ceiling. I hate this, he said. Me too. I want to tell you not to go. I know, but I also know you. He lifted his head. His eyes were serious in a way that made her chest ache a little. So I'm going to say this instead. Be careful about what you agree to. Whatever they ask you, whatever feels small and reasonable and manageable, it won't be small. Nothing they do is small. She nodded. And call me, he said, before and after. If I don't hear from you, you'll hear from me. If I don't hear from you within 2 hours of you leaving for dinner, I'm calling every person I know. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand once quickly. Okay. He stayed another hour. They didn't talk about it anymore. They talked about other things, regular things, his terrible new roommate, the fact that the diner had changed their coffee supplier, and the regulars had started a low-grade revolt. It was almost normal. She was grateful for the almost. After he left, she stood in her kitchen, picked up the second card, and dialed the number printed on the back. Vincent answered on the second ring. I'll come to dinner, she said. Tomorrow evening, he said immediately, as if it had already been planned. 11 o'clock. A car will be outside your building at 6:45. He gave her an address. She wrote it down. She said thank you, which felt surreal, and he said good evening, and the call was done. She stood in the kitchen for a while after looking at the address. A street in the north part of the city, well outside her neighborhood. She'd never been there. She slept badly. She dreamed this time fragments. None of them linear, a long table, a door that wouldn't open, the sound of her own voice saying something she couldn't hear. She woke at 5 and couldn't go back to sleep. She lay in the gray pre-dawn and thought about Tommy's words. Whatever feels small and reasonable and manageable, it won't be small. She got up. She went to work. She got through her shift by the same mechanism she always used: one table at a time, one customer at a time, one moment at a time. Don't think past the next thing in front of you. It had gotten her through worse than this. Or she had thought it had gotten her through worse. She was no longer sure what the scale of worse looked like. Diane found her at the end of the lunch rush. "You look better today," she said. "I slept," Clara said, which was mostly a lie. "Good." Diane studied her for a moment with those sharp waitress eyes. "You know, I've worked with a lot of people in this place, 20 years worth, and I can tell the difference between someone who's tired and someone who's carrying something they shouldn't be carrying alone." Clara looked at her. "I'm not asking," Diane said quickly. "It's not my business. But you're one of the good ones, Clara. Don't let anybody make you feel like you're not." Clara didn't know what to say. She said, "Thank you, Diane," and meant it more than she had meant almost anything that week. She left at 4. She went home. She showered and put on the best clothes she owned. Dark slacks, a simple blouse, her one nice jacket, and she stood in front of her bathroom mirror and looked at herself and tried to figure out who she was walking into that house as. Not a victim. She had decided that before she dialed Vincent's number. Not a supplicant, not someone afraid, a woman who made a choice in an alley and was living with the consequences of it, and who was going to walk through that door with her chin up the same way Rosa Russo had stood with her chin up in front of a knife. At 6:43, her phone buzzed. The car is outside. She picked up her bag. She checked that her phone was charged fully this time. She had made absolutely sure of that. She took one long breath in and let it out slow. Then she opened her door, walked down 4 flights of stairs, and stepped out into the night. The car was a black town car, long and quiet. The driver got out when he saw her and opened the rear door without speaking. She got in. The door closed. The city moved past the tinted windows as they headed north, and Clara sat in the leather quiet and kept her hands still in her lap and did not let herself think about the list of things that could go wrong tonight, because that list was infinite and she needed to think about something finite instead. She thought about what she wanted to say to Rosa Russo when she saw her, what she needed to make clear, that she was there out of necessity, not loyalty, that she was not the Russo family's property, their project, their asset, that she had a life small and difficult in hers and she intended to get back to it. She was rehearsing that conversation in her head, finding the words for it when the car turned off the main street and down a quieter road, and then pulled up in front of a house that was larger than she had expected, set back behind a low iron fence, every window lit against the dark. The driver opened her door. She got out. She stood on the sidewalk looking at the house, and then the front door opened and light spilled down the steps, and in the doorway stood a man she had never seen before. Tall, dark-haired, somewhere in his early 40s, wearing no jacket over his shirt, despite the cold standing, with one hand on the door frame like he owned not just the house but the air around it. He looked at her the way his mother had looked at her in the alley, with that same measuring, careful attention, with those same dark eyes. And Clara understood before he said a single word exactly who she was looking at. Damien Russo was nothing like the photographs she had seen in the newspaper articles. Not because he looked different, but because photographs had entirely failed to capture the particular quality of stillness he carried. That sense that every word he spoke and every movement he made had been considered and chosen, that nothing about him was accidental. He said, "Miss Martinez, thank you for coming." His voice was low and even and gave away nothing. Clara looked at him. She thought about the 4 people who had disappeared. She thought about Tommy's voice saying, "Once you sit at that table." She thought about Rosa saying, "I won't forget this." She lifted her chin. "I almost didn't," she said. Something moved in his expression, not quite a smile, something quieter and more complicated than that. "I know," he said. "Come inside." She had told herself in the car ride over that she would not be impressed, that she would walk into whatever this was with her eyes clear and her guard up and her feelings locked somewhere they couldn't be used against her. She had made that decision deliberately, the way you make decisions that you know you're going to need to hold on to. She lasted about 4 minutes, not because the house was overwhelming, though it was in a quiet, understated way that somehow felt more intimidating than obvious wealth. Not because of the other people she passed in the hallway. 2 men who moved aside without speaking and watched her with the particular attention of people trained to watch. It was because of Rosa. Rosa was waiting in a sitting room just off the entrance hall, standing when Clara came in, and she crossed the room and took both of Clara's hands in hers before Clara could say anything or brace for anything. Her hands were small and dry and very warm, and she held Clara's with a firmness that was not performance. It was the grip of a woman who meant exactly what she was doing. "You came," Rosa said. Just that, like it was the only thing that mattered. And something in Clara's chest, some tightly wound thing she had been carrying for 4 days, shifted without her permission. She felt her eyes sting and blinked hard against it, furious at herself, because she had not come here to feel anything. She had come here to be strategic, to be careful, to be the person Tommy had told her to be. "I came," Clara said. Her voice was steady. The rest of her was working on it. Damien was in the room too, standing near the far wall, and she was aware of him the way you are aware of something with gravity, not looking directly at it, but feeling its pull at the edge of everything. He had not spoken since the front door. He was watching the exchange between his mother and Clara with an expression that gave away nothing, which Clara was beginning to understand was simply how his face operated. Rosa released her hands and gestured to a chair. "Sit, please, you must be tired." "I'm fine," Clara said, and then heard herself say it and almost laughed because she had been saying that all week, and it had been untrue every single time. She sat. Rosa sat across from her. Damien, after a moment, sat too, not close, not at the table, but in a chair angled slightly away like a man attending a meeting. He had not called but felt obligated to observe. "I want to explain something to you," Rosa said. Her voice was the same as it had been on the phone, low measured, carrying that faint accent that Clara had now identified as Italian, softened by decades of American English layered over it. "I want to explain it directly, because I think you are someone who deserves directness." "Please," Clara said. "The men in the alley that night," Rosa said. "They were not robbers. They were sent by a man named Caruso Anton. Caruso, who has been trying for the past year to take things from my family. Territory, business. And when those don't work," she paused, "he tries other things." Clara kept her face still. "He tried to hurt you." "He tried to send a message," Rosa said. "There is a difference, but not much of one." She folded her hands in her lap. "They saw your face, Clara. They know you helped me. And Anton Caruso is not a man who lets things like that pass without a response." "You told me this on the phone," Clara said carefully, "that I was in danger." "Yes. And I have to ask you something." Clara looked at her directly. "Is that true, or is it something you're telling me so that I feel like I need you?" The room went very quiet, not an uncomfortable quiet, a quiet that had respect in it. Rosa looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Both things can be true at once." Clara blinked. "The danger is real," Rosa said. "I would not manufacture that, not to you, not after what you did. But I will not pretend that having you here, having you somewhere, I can see you and protect you, is not also something I want for my own peace of mind." She paused. "You saved my life, Clara. You stepped in front of a knife for a stranger. I am a woman who has been in this world a long time, and I can count on one hand the number of people who have done something like that without wanting anything in return." Clara looked at her hands in her lap. The cut from the keys had healed to a thin pink line. "I wasn't trying to be brave," she said quietly. "I just couldn't stand there." "I know," Rosa said. "That's what made it brave." From the corner of the room, Damien spoke for the first time since sitting down. His voice was level, careful, like a man who chose his moments. "Miss Martinez, my mother isn't asking you to become part of our business. She's asking to keep you safe while we deal with Caruso." Clara turned to look at him directly. He met her eyes without any apparent difficulty. "How long?" she asked. He considered. "Weeks, maybe less. Caruso is making moves that are going to force a resolution soon." "And what does keeping me safe look like practically?" "It looks like knowing where you are," Damien said. "A car when you need one. Someone close by. You keep your apartment, your life. We stay out of the way unless something happens." Clara studied him. He was telling her exactly what she wanted to hear, and she knew enough to know that was either the truth or an extremely good performance of it. The problem was she couldn't tell which, and she was aware, sitting in this room, that she was wildly out of her depth, that these were people who had been navigating conversations like this one since before she was born. "And if I say no," she asked, "if I just go home tonight and say thank you, but no thank you, a beat, Damien and Rosa exchanged a look, brief fast, the shorthand of people who had been reading each other for 40 years. Then we step back, Damien said. We don't force anything, but Caruso doesn't step back. And you won't have a way to know where the threat is or when it's coming. Clara absorbed that. She thought about the man in the doorway on Pembroke Street that she had almost convinced herself she'd imagined. She thought about the SUV. She thought about what Rosa had said on the phone. What we want and what is no longer possible are sometimes very different things. She was in it. She had been in it since the alley. This conversation was just the part where they were both honest about that. Okay, she said, while I'm thinking through all of this, can someone tell me exactly what Caruso wants, not generally, specifically? Damien looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, not much, but she was starting to read the small movements. Why? Because if I'm going to make any kind of decision here, I need to understand what's actually happening. Not the version that makes me feel like I should cooperate, the actual version. The silence that followed lasted about 6 seconds. Damien and Rosa looked at each other again. Then Rosa said, "Show her." Damien leaned forward, rested his elbows on his knees, and for the first time, looked less like a man managing a situation and more like someone deciding to be straightforward with her. It was a small change. It made him look briefly like a person rather than a position. He told her. Not everything she understood. There were layers she wasn't being given, but enough. Caruso was making a move on the eastern ports, which the Russo family controlled through a network of legitimate shipping businesses layered over arrangements that he did not specify and she did not ask him to. Caruso had tried negotiation, then leverage, then pressure on the family's legal counsel. When none of that worked, he had sent 2 men to a dark alley to deliver a different kind of message. And now the message had failed because a 26-year-old waitress had stepped in front of it. He's going to want to know what the Russo family's response is, Damien said. And he's going to be watching every person connected to us to figure that out. I'm not connected to you, Clara said. You are now, he said. Not unkindly, just factually, whether either of us wanted that or not. Clara sat with that, the weight of it, the absolute impartial unfairness of it, that she had done the right thing in a dark alley on a Wednesday night, and this was what the right thing cost. All right, she said finally, I have conditions. Rosa's expression didn't change. Damien's almost did. Nobody comes into my apartment, Clara said. I don't care what the reason is, that's mine. If there's a car outside, fine, but my door stays my door. Agreed, Damien said. I don't carry anything for you. I don't pass along any messages. I don't run any errands. If someone asks me something, I don't know anything because I don't know anything. That stays true. Agreed. And when this is over, when Caruso is handled, whatever that means, it's over for me too. I go back to my life and I stay out of yours. Damien looked at her steadily. Agreed, he said. A pause. Those are reasonable conditions. I know they are, Clara said. Rosa made a sound that was almost a laugh. It was the first time Clara had heard anything like warmth in her voice that wasn't directed at managing her. She glanced at Damien and said something in Italian too low and too fast for Clara to catch any of it. Damien didn't quite smile, but the edges of him softened almost imperceptibly for just a moment. A woman appeared in the doorway, middle-aged, efficient, radiating the energy of someone who ran the actual logistics of this household, and said that dinner was ready. Rosa stood. Clara stood. And they moved into the dining room, which was large and warmly lit and smelled overwhelmingly of something roasting with garlic and herbs, and Clara thought, I am having dinner with the Russo family. This is a thing that is actually happening. She sat where Rosa indicated across from Rosa, with Damien at the head of the table. 2 other men were present, introduced briefly as cousins' names. She immediately forgot, and they spoke around the table in the easy, comfortable rhythm of people used to each other, occasionally drawing Claire in, never pressing her, keeping the conversation on things that were not dangerous. A restaurant someone had been to. A problem with a supplier for one of the legitimate businesses. The cousins argued briefly and cheerfully about something to do with a sports team, and Rosa told them both they were wrong, and that appeared to be the end of it. It was, Clara thought, the strangest dinner of her life, and also in a way she could not entirely explain, and was not sure she should trust one of the least awful hours she'd had all week. After the main course, when the cousins had drifted out, and it was just the 3 of them over coffee, Rosa looked at Clara and said, How long have you been at the diner? 3 years, Clara said. You have family here? My sister's in Phoenix. My mother's there too. It's just me here. Rosa nodded slowly. Why did you stay? Clara considered the question. She could have deflected it. These people didn't need her biography, but Rosa had a way of asking things that made deflection feel rude. I had a plan, she said. I was going to save up and take classes at the community college. Business. I thought I could do something with that eventually. And, Rosa said, and it takes longer than you think to save money when you're also paying rent and utilities and everything else. She shrugged. The plan is still there. It's just slow. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You are braver than you know, Clara. Or more stubborn, Clara said. This time Damien did smile. It was brief and genuine, and it changed his face in a way that made him briefly unrecognizable from the controlled man who had opened the front door. Clara looked away from it because she didn't want to get caught looking. The car took her home at 10:15. Vincent was driving. He didn't speak, and she didn't try to fill the silence. She watched the city slide past the tinted windows and tried to process the evening into something she could understand. She had gone in with conditions. They had accepted every one. The danger was real, she believed that, or believed it enough to act on it. Rosa was complicated. Not what Clara had expected, not what the newspaper articles had prepared her for. Damien was more complicated still, and none of that meant she was safe. None of it meant she was free. She had agreed to something tonight, even if the agreement was technically limited and conditional, and she had insisted on terms. She had crossed a line that Tommy had told her she would not come back from clean. She was still thinking about it when she got upstairs. She unlocked her door, went into her kitchen, and called Tommy before she'd even taken her jacket off. He answered immediately. Tell me. She told him, all of it again straight through. He listened the same way, no interruptions until she was done. You agreed to it, he said. I agreed to very specific terms. Clara. His voice was careful. I love you, but that's exactly what someone says, right before they realize they agreed to much more than the terms. I know, she said. I know that. But Tommy, if Caruso is real, if those men are actually looking for me because I was there that night, then you're in danger whether you agreed to anything or not. Exactly, she said. So I might as well have some kind of protection, he said. Then quieter, yeah, I hear you. A pause. You trust her, Rosa. Clara thought about the warmth of Rosa's hands, the directness of her. The way she had said both things can be true at once, and the extraordinary honesty of that admission. I trust her the way you trust someone who is being honest with you for their own reasons, Clara said, which isn't the same as trusting her completely. But it's something. Tommy was quiet for a moment. And him, Damien, Clara looked at the kitchen wall. She thought about the almost smile, the way he had said those are reasonable conditions like he had not expected them to be, and like the surprise was something he respected. I don't know yet, she said. That night she slept. Properly this time. Not the desperate unconsciousness of exhaustion, but real sleep, and she thought it was because a decision had been made, however imperfect, however frightening, and her body had finally been given permission to rest. She woke at 7. She made coffee. She checked her phone, a message from an unknown number, just 5 words. Cars outside if needed. She went to her window and looked down, and there was a black car at the curb, engine off unobtrusive. She did not need it that morning. She walked to work the way she always did, and the car didn't follow her. She checked, but she noticed 2 blocks from the diner, a man on the opposite sidewalk who fell into the same pace she was walking, and who she saw again from the window of the diner 40 minutes later. Just there, not watching her directly, but present. The same stillness as Vincent, the same trained invisibility. She should have found it suffocating. She found it instead something she was embarrassed to name, slightly less terrifying than the 4 days before when she had been alone in it. Her shift was a regular Tuesday. Nothing happened. No SUVs, no envelopes, no men in suits. She refilled coffee and took orders and let Diane make her laugh twice about the new busboy who was afraid of the walk-in freezer, and for stretches of an hour at a time she was just Clara, just at work, just doing the next thing in front of her. It was almost normal. She was starting to understand that almost normal was what she was going to have for a while, and she was working on making her peace with that when her phone buzzed at the end of her shift. Not an unknown number this time. Damien Russo's name. which meant he had put himself in her phone at some point without telling her which she filed under things to address later. The message read, "Caruso made contact this morning. He knows you had dinner with us last night. Stay close to the car tonight." Clara read it twice. She thought about the careful, even way he had explained Caruso over dinner. She thought about those men in the alley and the knife that had been completely steady in its owner's hand. She typed back, "How did he find out so fast?" The reply came in under a minute. "He has eyes too." She stood in the break room with her jacket half on and read that and felt the temperature of everything change. Because that was the thing she hadn't quite let herself face, not just that Caruso's people were somewhere out there, general and distant, but that they were close. That they had known about dinner before she had finished sleeping off dinner. That they were watching her the way the Russo family was watching her. From the other direction, she finished putting on her jacket. She picked up her bag. She walked out of the diner and the car was there, not at the curb where it had been that morning, but parked across the street, and the driver was already watching for her and got out when he saw her come through the door. She got in. The door closed. She said, "Take me home." The driver nodded and pulled out into traffic, and Clara sat in the back with her phone in her hands and thought about what it meant to have two powerful and dangerous sets of eyes on her at the same time, and only one of them was in any sense on her side. She thought about Tommy's voice. Once you sit at that table, she had sat at the table. She had made conditions. She had thought in a room that smelled like garlic and family that she had drawn a line and the line would hold. She was beginning to understand that the line had been drawn on water. Her phone buzzed again. "Damien, don't be afraid, but don't be careless either." She looked at those words for a long time. Then she looked out the window at the city, moving past all those ordinary people with their ordinary problems. And she thought about the version of herself that had stood in that alley with nothing but keys and a bluff, and the absolute inability to walk away from someone who needed help. She had been so sure in that moment that she was doing the right thing. She was still sure of it. But right things she was learning did not arrive with warranties. They didn't guarantee clean outcomes or safe returns. They just were what they were, right and costly, and entirely hers to carry. The car stopped outside her building. She got out. She looked up at her window on the 4th floor yellow light because she always left the lamp on, and she thought, "This is still my life. This is still mine." Then she went inside, locked both locks, and sat down at the kitchen table with her phone and Damien Russo's last message still on the screen. "Don't be afraid, but don't be careless either." She put the phone down. She pressed her hands flat on the table. And somewhere across the city, in a building she had never seen and could not name, a man named Anton Caruso was looking at a report about a waitress from Pembroke Street who had stepped into an alley she shouldn't have and sat at a table she shouldn't have sat at, and deciding what to do about her. Clara didn't know that yet, not specifically, but she felt it. The way you feel weather before it arrives, the pressure change, the stillness before the thing itself. She felt it in her chest, deep and certain, like a door about to open from the other side. She didn't sleep well that night, despite her body's best efforts. She kept waking at small sounds, a pipe settling a door somewhere down the hall, and each time she woke, she lay in the dark for a moment, listening with her whole body before her brain caught up and reminded her where she was. Her own apartment, her own bed, both locks on the door. She was up before her alarm at 5:40, and she didn't try to go back to sleep. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the dark and thought about what Damien's message had meant. "He knows you had dinner with us." She turned it over the way you turn a stone, looking at every side. Caruso had eyes on the Russo house that was expected, probably in a world where these two families were actively at war with each other. But the speed of it, the certainty of it, that suggested someone close. Someone inside or close enough to inside that the distance didn't matter. She thought, "I am thinking like someone who lives in this world," and she recognized that thought as dangerous and filed it away. Her phone buzzed at 6:15. "Tommy, you okay?" She typed back. "Awake. Thinking. Fine. 3 dots. Then, that combination has never once meant fine." She almost smiled. She put her phone down and finished her coffee and got dressed for work, and when she looked out the window, the black car was at the curb again, same position as yesterday, same stillness. She had the strange feeling it had been there all night. She walked to work. The same man she'd clocked yesterday fell into pace 2 blocks behind her. She didn't look back at him directly. She'd learned that from watching Vincent, from the way trained stillness worked. You didn't confirm that you knew. You just knew. The morning rush hit the diner hard. She moved through it automatically, her body doing the work while her mind ran its quiet parallel track. Table 2 wanted decaf. Table 5 had a complicated egg order. The couple in the corner booth had been nursing one coffee between them for 40 minutes, and she needed to turn that table. Ordinary, necessary, hers. Diane caught her by the coffee station at 8:30. That man is outside again. Clara went still. Which man? The one from last week. Suit, standing on the corner. Diane's voice was low and even. This is the 3rd time this week, Clara. I'm not blind. Clara looked at her. Diane's expression was not frightened. It was the particular expression of a woman who has navigated a lot of the world's harder edges and learned not to flinch at them. Concerned, steady. He's not someone I need to worry about, Clara said carefully. Okay, Diane said. Then is he someone I need to worry about? No, I promise. Diane looked at her for another moment. Then she nodded once and went back to her tables. Clara exhaled and poured coffee for table 3 and kept moving. At 10:15, her phone buzzed. Damien, can you talk? She typed back. On shift, 1 hour. At 11:20, she stepped into the alley behind the diner for her break and called him back. He answered immediately. There's been a development, he said. No preamble. She was beginning to understand that was just how he talked. He moved through pleasantries, the way rivers move through obstacles around them without slowing. What kind, she said. Caruso sent someone to your building this morning. Not to your apartment, to the lobby. He spoke to your super. Asked questions. Clara's hand tightened on her phone. Bon, what kind of questions? Your schedule, your habits, whether you had family in the city. A pause. Marco didn't tell him anything useful, but Clara, the fact that he's asking means he's already decided you're relevant to him. She leaned against the wall and pressed her free hand flat against the cold brick and focused on that sensation, real solid present. What does relevant mean? It means he wants leverage over us, and he's decided you might be it. She had known on some level since Damien's message last night. She had felt it in her chest the way you feel weather. But hearing it stated plainly in Damien Russo's level, careful voice was a different thing from knowing it. It was the difference between seeing clouds and feeling rain. What do I do? She said. Don't change your routine. Changing your routine tells him he's getting somewhere. Keep going to work. Keep coming home. Let our people stay close. A brief pause. And I need to ask you something. Ask. Is there anyone Caruso could use, someone close to you? Family? A friend? Someone who doesn't have valid protection? Tommy, the name arrived in her chest before her brain had finished forming the thought. Tommy, who lived alone, 3 neighborhoods over, who had no idea what being watched looked like, who had told her once you sit at that table, and then driven over with coffee anyway because that was who he was. Yes, she said. Her voice had gone flat. My friend Tommy, he knows about the situation. He's the only one I told. A short silence. Send me his address. Damien. I'm not going to do anything to him, Clara. His voice was patient but had a firmness under it. I'm going to make sure someone watches his building too. That's all. She breathed. She thought about Tommy and the coffee and the way he'd said, I hate this, with all the weight of someone who hated it because he loved her. She thought about what it would mean if Caruso found Tommy before she could warn him. She sent the address. Thank you, Damien said. Go finish your shift. I'll be in touch. He ended the call. She stood in the alley for another minute, the phone in her hand, the cold November air doing nothing to clear her head. Then she went back inside and finished her shift. She called Tommy on her lunch break. He answered cheerfully, the background noise of a kitchen behind him. Hey, Guy. Tommy. Her voice dropped all its pretense. Listen to me. There are people, not Russo, people the other side who have been asking about me. My schedule, my building. They might look for people close to me. The kitchen noise disappeared. She heard a door close. How close? Close enough that I gave Damien your address so someone could watch your building. Silence, then very quietly, You gave the Russo family my home address. To protect you. Clara. I know, Tommy. But if the alternative is, no, I know. He exhaled. I know, you did the right thing. It's just every day there's one more thing. His voice had something tired in it that hadn't been there at the start of the week. Are you safe? Right now, yes. Right now, he repeated. Great, very comforting. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry I got you into this. You didn't get me into anything, he said, and his voice had sharpened back up, losing the tiredness. You called me because you needed someone and I'm that someone. Don't apologize for that. A pause. Just be careful, please, and actually answer your phone. I will. She hung up and sat for a moment with the phone in her lap and the specific grinding guilt of having pulled someone she loved into the radius of something dangerous. She had not chosen this. She kept reminding herself of that, but not choosing it didn't make it lighter. The afternoon passed. Her shadow on the street was different from this morning. She noticed the change, the way she was starting to notice all of it, registering the shift without being able to stop it. Shorter man, darker jacket, just as still. They were rotating. They didn't want her to get too used to any particular face. She was almost home when it happened. She had turned onto Pembroke Street and was half a block from her building when a car she didn't recognize pulled up alongside her and slowed to match her pace. Not a black town car, something cheaper. Gray, nothing notable about it. The window came down. Clara Martinez. The voice was accented, not Italian, something else, something she couldn't place in the shock of the moment. The man in the passenger seat was looking at her without particular hostility, but without anything warm either. The particular blankness of someone doing a job. Mr. Caruso would like to speak with you. Clara kept walking. Her heart rate had tripled, but her legs kept moving, muscle memory of a city woman who had walked these blocks 1,000 times. I don't know anyone by that name, she said. He knows you, the man said. He'd like 5 minutes. Very informal. I'm busy, she said. Miss Martinez. His voice changed, not threatening exactly, but with a weight in it, now a seriousness that made the hair on her arms stand. 5 minutes, tonight, at a place of your choosing if you prefer. He just wants to talk. She glanced sideways at him once fast. He was watching her with those flat professional eyes. Tell him I'm not interested in talking, she said. The window went up. The car kept pace for another few seconds, then accelerated and turned at the next corner and was gone. Clara walked the rest of the block to her building on legs that felt made of something that wasn't quite solid. She got inside, got up the stairs, got through her door and locked both locks and stood with her back against it. She was already dialing Damien before the second lock clicked. He answered in 2 rings. What happened? Caruso's people just approached me on my street, she said. Gray car, 2 men, wanted me to meet with Caruso. I said no and they left. A silence that lasted exactly 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, she had the sensation of something large and cold moving beneath the surface of the conversation, the way you feel the depth of water before you can see the bottom. You're inside your apartment, he said. Yes. Stay there, I'm sending Vincent. Damien. Clara. His voice had dropped. It wasn't raised, it never raised, but the weight of it had changed. They approached you in the open, on your street. That means they know our coverage, and they're not afraid of it. That changes things. What does it change, she asked. The timeline, he said. Stay inside. He hung up. She stood in her hallway with the phone in her hand and thought about the way the man in the car had said, 5 minutes, very informal. Like it was nothing. Like she had a choice that was really a choice. She thought about Damien's voice saying they're not afraid of it and what that implied about what Caruso knew and how he knew it. She went to her kitchen. She didn't sit down. She was too wired to sit. She paced the length of the kitchen twice and then stopped herself because pacing was not useful, and she needed to be useful. She thought about what Caruso wanted. Not from the Russo family, she understood that well enough from what Damien had told her. From her, specifically. What did she represent to him? Not intelligence, she didn't have any, not access. She had a very limited and conditional access to the Russo house that she'd only used once. She was, from Caruso's perspective, a 26-year-old waitress from a walk-up on Pembroke Street who had stumbled into the wrong alley, unless she stopped pacing, unless she wasn't leverage against the Russos at all, unless she was something else, a message, a demonstration that Caruso could reach anyone connected to the family anywhere at any time. Not because he wanted her specifically, but because taking her or hurting her or simply making her disappear would say something that words couldn't. She thought about the 4 people the articles had mentioned, the ones who had stopped being problems. She thought about the phrase "stop being problems" and felt sick. Vincent arrived in 20 minutes. He knocked 3 times even and measured. She was beginning to understand. That was his signature, everything measured. And when she opened the door, he looked at her face and said, "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. "I'm fine." He nodded. "May I come in?" She stepped back. He came in and stood in the hallway just inside the door, not going further, respecting the conditions she had set at dinner. Nobody inside her apartment. He honored it without being asked. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. She told him. He listened without moving, without interrupting, with the same complete attention he applied to everything. When she finished, he asked 3 questions: the car's make, which direction it had turned, whether the driver or the passenger had spoken. And then he was quiet for a moment. "The passenger," he said. "Can you describe him?" She did. Mid-40s, light eyes, the accent she couldn't place. Vincent's expression did something very small. She almost missed it. "You're sure about the accent?" "Pretty sure." "Why?" A pause. "Because it narrows down who Caruso sent, which tells us something about how seriously he's taking this." He pulled out his phone and typed something. Then he looked back at her. "Mr. Russo would like you to consider coming to stay at the house for a few days." Clara stared at him. "At the Russo house?" "Yes." "No," she said immediately. Vincent's face remained neutral. "I'm communicating his suggestion, not—" "I heard you. The answer is no. Those were my conditions, and that was one of them. My apartment stays mine. I stay here." He looked at her steadily. "The situation has changed since those conditions were discussed." "A lot of things can change," Claire said, "but I'm not going to let fear make my decisions for me. If I leave this apartment because Caruso's people drove slowly past me, then I am telling him and telling everyone that he can move me, that he has that power." She paused. "Does that make sense to you?" Another very small expression crossed Vincent's face. If she had to name it, she would have called it something like respect, although that seemed presumptuous. "It makes sense," he said. "I'll communicate it to Mr. Russo. Tell him I said thank you for the concern." Vincent almost smiled. It was such a brief thing that she thought she might have imagined it. He said he would stay in the building tonight in the lobby, not on her floor, and that she should lock her door and text the number he gave her if anything happened, anything at all. She said she would. She meant it. After he left, she called Tommy. He answered on the first ring this time. "They approached me," she said. "On the street." A sharp intake of breath. "Clara." "I'm inside. Vincent's in the lobby. I'm fine. But Tommy, I need to tell you, because if they know your connection to me, they might try the same thing with you, and you need to—" "I know," he said. "I know what to do. Don't answer questions. Don't open doors. Text you." A pause. "There's a man in a green jacket outside my building." Clara closed her eyes briefly. "That's one of ours, Russo. He's there to watch." A long silence. "One of ours," Tommy said slowly. "You just said one of ours, Clara." She opened her mouth, closed it, because he was right. She had said it without thinking, without catching herself. "It's a figure of speech," she said. "Is it?" She didn't have an answer for that. They stayed on the line together for a while without talking, just the sound of each other breathing across the distance. And she thought about how a single sentence could illuminate something about yourself that you weren't ready to see. Her phone buzzed against her ear. Incoming message from Damien. She checked it without ending the call with Tommy. "Caruso has requested a meeting with me tomorrow. I'm going to take it. Don't go to work tomorrow." She stared at that. Don't go to work. The request sat wrong in her chest, not because it wasn't reasonable, but because she had in the last 4 days held onto the routine of work like a rope in water. Coffee, uniform, Diane, tables, normal. It had been the thing tethering her to the version of herself that existed before Alderman Alley. She typed back why his response was immediate because, "Until I know what Caruso wants from this meeting, I don't want you out in the open. One day, Clara, I'll know more by tomorrow evening." She looked at the message for a long moment. Then she looked at the kitchen wall. Then she looked at the drawer where the first cream-colored card still sat. She typed, "Okay, one day." "Tommy," she said into the phone, "I have to ask you something." "Yeah." "When did I stop being the person this was happening to and start being someone who says, one of ours?" A long pause. Not uncomfortable. Tommy was the kind of person who could hold silence without filling it with noise. "I don't think those are two different people," he said finally. "I think you're still the same person. I think the situation is just pulling on different parts of you." "What if the parts it's pulling on are ones I don't want pulled?" He thought about it. "Then you name them," he said, "and you see them clearly, and you make sure they don't get ahead of the parts that are still yours." She sat with that. Outside her window, the city moved through its ordinary night cars and distant voices and a dog barking somewhere below. All of it indifferent and continuous and completely unchanged by what was happening in this apartment. "Thank you," she said. "Always," he said. "Lock your windows too, not just the door." She laughed. It surprised her actual and forced laughter, quick and brief, and it felt like breaking the surface of something. "Good night, Tommy." "Good night." She locked the windows. She made tea she didn't drink. She sat at the kitchen table with Damien's messages on her screen and thought about tomorrow's meeting between two dangerous men in which she was depending on how you looked at it, either the subject or the excuse or the proof of something. At 9:40, her phone buzzed one more time. "Damien, Rosa wants you to know she's thinking of you tonight." Clara read it. She read it again. She thought about the warmth of Rosa's hands, the directness of her eyes. Both things can be true at once. She typed back, "Tell her I'm okay. Tell her I'm not afraid." She sent it. Then she sat in the quiet kitchen and thought about whether that was true. It was close enough. She decided close enough would have to do. She went to bed. She set her alarm out of habit even though she wasn't going to work. She lay in the dark and listened to the building settle around her and thought about a man named Anton Caruso sitting across a table from Damien Russo tomorrow and her own name somewhere in the space between them. She thought about the alley, the knife, the 3 seconds that had changed everything. She had stepped forward. She would step forward again. She didn't know what that said about her, whether it was courage or compulsion or simply the wiring she'd been born with. But it was hers. Caruso could surveil her street and send men with accents she couldn't place and request meetings in gray cars. He could put her name in conversations she wasn't allowed to attend. He could not have that part of her. The part that had stepped forward, that part was not negotiable. She closed her eyes and held on to that, and finally, in the early part of the night, before the city had gone fully quiet, she slept. She woke before her alarm with the particular alertness of someone whose nervous system had stopped trusting sleep. The apartment was quiet, both locks still on. Her phone showed 6:42 and 3 messages she hadn't heard come in overnight. The first was from Vincent, sent at 2:17 in the morning, quiet night. All clear. The second was from Tommy, sent at 6:30, still here, green jacket guy is still outside. He got coffee at some point. I respect the commitment. The third was from Damien, sent 11 minutes ago. Meeting with Caruso is set for noon. Stay inside until you hear from me. She read all 3, lying on her back in the dark, the phone held above her face, and she thought about the word until. Not if you hear from me, until. The specificity of it felt deliberate, and she held on to it the way you hold on to the small, precise things when the large things are out of your hands. She got up. She made coffee. She did not turn on the television because she didn't want noise. She wanted to be able to hear the building, the hallway, the street below. She sat at the kitchen table with her coffee and her phone and the 2 cream-colored cards that were still there that she had not moved, that had become in some strange way the fixed point of the past week, the physical evidence that this was real and not something her exhausted mind had constructed. She thought about Damien in a room with Anton Caruso. She tried to imagine it and found she didn't know what Damien looked like in a room where he was the one with power, where it was the other person who needed to manage their fear. She had only seen him on his own ground, which was always, and she was only beginning to understand what it meant, that his own ground seemed to extend to every room he entered. At 8:15, she called her sister. Sarah answered on the second ring, sounding slightly breathless, the way she always did on school mornings with 2 kids under 10. "Hey, Is everything okay? You never call this early. Everything's fine, Clara said. I had a weird week and I wanted to hear your voice. A pause. She heard the background noise shift, a door closing, Sarah stepping away from whatever chaos the morning required. Okay, talk to me. What kind of weird week? Clara looked at the ceiling. She thought about how much to say, ran the calculation she had been running all week, what protects Sarah, what just frightens her, and said, the kind where you realize your life is different than you thought it was. And you're not sure yet if that's bad or just different. That is extremely vague, Sarah said. I know. Clara, did something happen? I helped someone, Clara said, a stranger, and it turned out to be more complicated than I expected. Silence. Then Sarah said very carefully, are you safe? Yes, Clara said. And it was true in this moment in this kitchen with Vincent in the lobby and a man in a green jacket on Tommy's block and Damien Russo sitting across a table from the person who had decided she was useful. Right now, yes. That's twice this week you've answered that question with right now, Sarah said. Clara had not realized she'd said it to Sarah before. I'm okay, she said more firmly. I promise. I just wanted to hear your voice. Tell me about the kids. Sarah told her. 15 minutes of ordinary life, her daughter's school play, her son's inexplicable new obsession with collecting bottle caps, a problem with the neighbor's dog that had become a minor neighborhood drama. Clara listened to all of it and let it land on her like warm water. Real, continuing, uninterrupted life. The kind that kept going, regardless of what happened in dark alleys or around formal dining tables or in gray cars on Pembroke Street. When they hung up, Clara felt steadier. Not fixed, there was nothing to fix yet, but steadier the way a compass settles after you've been spinning it. She waited. She cleaned her apartment, which it didn't need, but her hands needed something to do. She reorganized the kitchen cabinet that had been bothering her for 6 months. She sat down and tried to read the same paragraph 4 times without retaining any of it. She did 40 minutes of stretching on her living room floor because her body had been carrying tension for a week and it showed. Noon came and went. At 12:40, her phone buzzed. Tommy, everything okay on your end? Haven't heard from you in a while. She typed back, waiting. We'll update when I know something. At 1:15, she stood up from the couch and paced her kitchen again, and she thought about what Damien had said. The timeline has changed, and she thought about what that meant about today, whether noon had been chosen for a reason, whether something had already happened or not happened, whether the absence of a message was itself a message. At 1:32, her phone rang. Damien. She answered before the second ring. Tell me. It's done, he said. 2 words. She felt them in her chest like something releasing a pressure she hadn't realized had been building for days. What does done mean? It means Caruso and I reached an understanding, he said. The details aren't something I'll go into, but the situation that made you a variable that's resolved. I'm not a variable anymore, she said. No. A pause. You're not. She sat down on the kitchen floor because standing suddenly seemed like more effort than it was worth. She pressed her back against the cabinet and looked up at the ceiling and thought it's over. Or something is over. The particular shape of danger that had been living in her chest since the alley that specific cold thing was, it actually gone. Clara. His voice was quieter than she had heard it before. Less managed somehow. I need to tell you something about the meeting. Okay? Caruso brought you up, Damien said. Before I could. He wanted to talk about you specifically. She waited. He said the men he sent to the alley reported something. That when you stepped in front of my mother, you didn't hesitate. Not even for a moment, Wessa. A pause. He said that made you dangerous. Clara stared at the ceiling. I'm a waitress. I know. I had keys and a dead phone and I was bluffing so hard I could barely breathe. I know, Damien said again, something in his voice that was almost warmth. I told him that. What did he say? He said it didn't matter. He said people who act without hesitation in a crisis are the most unpredictable kind, and unpredictable people make him nervous. A brief pause. He wanted assurances that you weren't going to be weaponized by us. Clara let that sit for a moment. He thought you were going to use me. Yes. As what? He wasn't specific, but I think he looked at a 26-year-old woman who walked into a dangerous situation without flinching, and he saw something he didn't know how to account for. And things Caruso can't account for bother him. Damien paused. I told him you were under our protection, but not in our employ, that you were a civilian and intended to remain one, and that any move against you would be treated as a direct move against the family. Clara was quiet for a moment. And he believed you. He believed that I meant it, Damien said, which is the thing that matters. As she absorbed that distinction, the precision of it, the way it said something true about the world Damien lived in, where belief in intentions mattered more than belief in facts. So what now, she said. Now, he said, you go back to your life. She had wanted to hear those words for a week. She had imagined herself hearing them and feeling pure relief, simple and clean and complete. Instead, what she felt was more complicated than that relief, yes, and underneath it, something else she couldn't immediately name. Not reluctance. She was not reluctant to be free of this, but a kind of strangeness. The sudden lightness of a weight you'd been carrying so long, you'd forgotten it wasn't part of you. The car in the morning, as she said, the man outside my building. We'll step back, he said, today. And Tommy's building. Same. She nodded alone in her kitchen at no one. Okay, she said. Okay, thank you. Clara. He said her name the way he had said it at the front door the night of dinner, considered precise. My mother would like to see you again. Not there's no agenda. She just wants to see you. Tell her I'd like that, Clara said, and meant it, which surprised her slightly, the ease with which she meant it. I will, he said, and then after a pause that had something unguarded in it, something she had not heard from him before. You did well this week. Most people would not have handled it the way you did. She thought about the kitchen floor she was sitting on, the 4 days of bad sleep, the moment on the street with the gray car, the conversation with Tommy where she had said one of ours without catching herself. I don't know if I handled it, she said. I think I just moved through it. That's what handling it looks like, he said, from the outside. She didn't have an answer for that. They said goodbye, and she sat on the kitchen floor for another few minutes after the call ended. The phone in her lap, the refrigerator humming beside her head, the city doing its continuous, ordinary thing outside the window. Then she got up. She called Tommy. He answered with, "Talk to me." "It's over," she said. A long exhale, the kind that carries a week's worth of held breath. Over as in they met, they resolved whatever they needed to resolve. Caruso backed off, the cars are standing down. She paused. Over. Clara, his voice had gone thick at the edges. Okay, good. You can stop checking your windows every 20 minutes, Umal. I was checking every 15 for the record. A pause. Are you okay? Actually okay. She thought about it honestly. She looked at the 2 cards on her kitchen table. She thought about Rose's hands and Damien's careful voice and the knife in the alley and the 3 seconds that had started all of it. I think so, she said. I think I will be. I need a few days to decompress and sleep like a normal person and eat something that isn't stress-eaten leftovers. She paused. I need to go back to work tomorrow and be boring. Being boring sounds incredible, Tommy said. Can I come over tonight? I'll bring food. Real food, not diner food. Yes, she said, please. She hung up. She stood in the middle of her kitchen and took one long breath in and let it all the way out. Then she picked up the 2 cream-colored cards from the table. She held them both and looked at them, the embossed RR, the careful handwriting. You showed courage. You will be protected. Don't be afraid. She put them in the drawer. Not thrown away. Kept. She wasn't entirely sure what that meant. She told herself she was keeping them because they were evidence of something that had happened a week she would need to remember clearly, a thing she had been through that deserved to be treated as real. All of that was true, but there was something else too, something she was honest enough with herself to acknowledge they were kept because Rosa Russo had meant what she said, and that meant something to Clara. In a week full of things she couldn't trust fully, that had been a thing she could. She showered. She put on clean clothes. She opened her front door and stood in the hallway for a moment. Just stood there, breathing, feeling the specific texture of a space that was hers again, without qualification. Mrs. Hendrick's chair was empty. The hallway was just a hallway. She walked downstairs. She went through the lobby. Vincent was not there. She stepped outside and looked at the curb, and the black car was gone. The corner where the gray car had slowed to match her pace was just a corner. The sidewalk was full of ordinary people, doing ordinary things, all of it continuing, without interruption, without any awareness of the week that had just happened inside of it. She walked. No particular destination. She walked the way she had walked as a child when she needed to think. No earphones, no phone in hand, just her feet in the city, and the particular quality of November air that felt like it was asking you to pay attention. She walked past the end of Alderman Alley and stopped. She stood at the entrance for a moment. The dumpster, the broken lamp still not fixed, still flickering in the early afternoon light. The bench nobody sat on. It looked exactly like it had always looked, exactly like nothing at all. The most ordinary alley in the city. She had run a calculation at the entrance to this alley a week ago, a practical, urgent calculation about bus fare and walking time, and the $11.43 in her pocket. And then she had heard a voice say, "Give it up, old lady," and every calculation had stopped. She had never been able to stand there and do nothing. She had known that about herself since she was 9 years old, since she had told a teacher about a boy being bullied in a way that cost her 2 weeks of social difficulty, and which she would do again without hesitation. It was wiring. It was the thing that made her useful, and the thing that made her catastrophically unsuited to minding her own business. It was her. She looked at the alley one more moment, then she walked on. Tommy arrived at 6 with Thai food in a paper bag and the particular relieved energy of someone who has been holding themselves together out of loyalty and is only now allowing themselves to let go slightly. He came in and put the food on the table and looked at her, really looked at her the way he looked when he was taking inventory and said, "You look tired." "I am tired, but okay." "Getting there," she said. "Better than yesterday, miles better than 4 days ago." He sat down. She sat across from him, and they opened containers and ate, and for a while they talked about nothing dangerous at all. The new menu item at his restaurant that nobody was ordering. The bottle cap thing with her nephew. Whether the diner's coffee was genuinely worse now, or whether she'd just been in a bad mood every time she tasted it for the last week. It was only after the food was mostly gone, and they were sitting back with the easy looseness of people who have known each other for 16 years that Tommy said, "So what happens now with them?" Clara thought about how to answer. "Rosa wants to see me again," she said. I don't know, just because she wants to." Tommy considered this. "And you want to go?" "I think I do," she said, "which is strange. I know it's strange." "It's not completely strange," he said. "She's from everything you have described. She sounds like someone worth knowing, even accounting for everything else she is." "Both things can be true at once," Clara said, Rosa's words and Rosa's voice coming out of her own mouth. Tommy looked at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, I think that's right." "And Damien," she stopped, picked up her glass, set it down. I don't know what he is yet." Tommy raised an eyebrow, just slightly. "Not like that," she said. "I didn't say anything." "Your eyebrow did." He laughed and she laughed, and it was the second time this week she had laughed like that, real and involuntary and light, and it felt like proof that she was still herself, that the week had not compressed her into something different and unrecognizable. After Tommy left, she stood at the kitchen window for a while and looked down at the street. No black car, no man in a green jacket or a dark jacket or any jacket stationed with the stillness of someone doing a job. Just Pembroke Street being Pembroke Street, indifferent and continuous. She thought about what Damien had said. People who act without hesitation in a crisis are the most unpredictable kind. She had never thought of herself as unpredictable. She had always thought of herself as someone who was in most ways completely predictable. She helped when she could help. She stayed when staying was hard. She worked her shifts and counted her money and kept her plan alive, even when it moved slowly. That was not unpredictable. That was just who she was. But she understood, standing at the window on a quiet Thursday night, that Caruso had looked at those qualities and seen something that frightened him. Not because she was powerful. She was about as far from powerful as a person could be with her walk-up apartment and her split shifts and her $11.43. But because the thing that had driven her into that alley was not power, it was something older and harder to account for, something that didn't calculate odds. And people who don't calculate odds are to men who live by calculating odds genuinely terrifying. She felt something settle in her when she understood that. Not pride exactly, something quieter, a kind of recognition of herself that she hadn't had before, not a new self, but a clearer view of the one she already was. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up expecting Tommy or possibly Damien. It was Rosa, not a call. A message the first time Rosa had texted her directly, and it was brief and it was characteristically perfectly precise. Dinner Sunday, nothing complicated, just food. I make a very good Sunday gravy. Bring your friend if you want. Clara stared at the message for a long moment. She thought about Rosa's hands, about the kitchen that had smelled like garlic and family, about the complete unperformable calm of a woman who had stood with a knife at her chest and kept her chin up. She thought about what it meant to be known by someone like that. To be seen clearly, not idealized, not used, not managed, but actually seen. She typed back, "Sunday works. I'll be there." She put her phone down. She went to her bed. She set her alarm for 6:15 because she was going back to work tomorrow, back to the coffee and the regulars and Diane's sharp observations and the ordinary essential rhythm of her actual life. She was going back because it was hers, and she had never stopped wanting it, and no amount of black cars or cream-colored cards or negotiating tables had changed that. She lay in the dark and let herself feel all of it at once, the exhaustion, the relief, the strangeness, the things she could not quite name that lived in the space where a very difficult week was giving way to whatever came next. She felt it without trying to resolve it or reduce it to something simpler than it was. Because she was someone who had walked into an alley on a Wednesday night with nothing but keys and a bluff, and the absolute unshakable inability to turn away. She was someone who had sat at a table with people who terrified most of the city and held her own conditions and watched them be respected. She was someone who had been called dangerous by a man with real power and who understood now that he was not entirely wrong, not because she had any of the things power usually required, but because she had the one thing that power could not predict or purchase or account for. She had meant it, every time, all the way through. That was the thing Anton Caruso had seen in the alley report and not known how to file. That was the thing Rosa had seen and recognized and chosen not to forget. That was the thing Damien had been measuring carefully and continuously across every exchange they had. Clara Martinez had stepped forward. She would step forward again. Not because the world rewarded it, it often didn't, and this week had illustrated that with considerable clarity. But because stepping forward was what she did. It was the most essential and irreducible thing about her, and she had walked through the hardest week of her life and come out the other side, and it was still intact. That part had never been in danger. She closed her eyes. The city hummed its continuous hum. The building settled. Her alarm was set. Work tomorrow. Dinner Sunday. Her life complicated, now changed in ways she was still learning the shape of, but unmistakably irreversibly hers. She slept.